I've been doing this YouTube thing for about a year now, so I think I have it down to a science. Unfortunately, that science is chaos theory. So that's why I'm going to be telling you about my exploits up in Canada for my summer vacation from my house in North Carolina, because I'm a YouTube professional. Hey folks, Dave here. So for my summer vacation, I went back up to my homeland of Canada, and I got into a bunch of exploits, some of which are interesting, some are not. But the ones I wanted to talk to you about are the photography ones that I got up to. Starting with a photo shoot I did with some of the best photography friends a guy could ask for. We've made it a habit over the last few years of heading to one of our friends' backyards with a bunch of photographers and a couple models and just seeing what happens in getting up to photography exploits, and this year was no exception. One of the models was Erin, and she dressed up like an elf queen, you know, as one does. And she had in her possession this large acorn with a lid on it. When I see a large acorn with a lid on it, I think somebody needs to look inside that object and see what's there. So that's what I decided to do. I grabbed a lume cube and I tossed it inside the acorn and got her to react to looking inside of it. I thought it lacked something. I thought it lacked a little bit of oomph, a little bit of extra interest. And that's when somebody mentioned that they brought along a can of atmosphere aerosol. An atmosphere aerosol is basically just a smoke machine in a can. And I thought mixing that in with it would kind of give that look of something interesting coming out of the acorn. So I retried the foot shoot, getting her to react to the acorn lit up with the smoke coming out of it. That ended up working a lot better, and I picked my favorite one of those and finished processing it. When you're at one of these types of events, it's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of photographers and a lot of models, and everyone's just kind of being creative and going back and forth. So sometimes you just jump into what somebody else is doing. After that, we went to a local park and shot some photos from this river that goes to this old tunnel. And it always amazes me how quickly models are okay with just jumping into the water, because this is cold water. Even though it's the height of summer, this is some really cold water. So Carrie dressed up as an angel and she jumped in the water and started doing a bunch of poses with Gary adding some atmosphere aerosol to kind of give the whole area atmosphere. I'd worked with Erin before, and we actually met up the last few times I was at one of these photo shoots. And the last time I was up there, she asked me if I could 3D print a Scarlet Witch mask. And I thought, sure, why not? So I did, and I printed one off and I painted it up and was finally able to deliver it to her on this trip here. So I got her to pose with it. Now she hasn't had a chance to finish off her whole Scarlet Witch outfit, so I got her to wear what she was wearing. I changed her from what you had on to a Scarlet Witch in post, even including the wiggly woo magic. And I thought that actually turned out pretty good, and I really can't wait to be able to go back and shoot her as Scarlet Witch with a full-on outfit. Now let's head over to my next place of photographic shenanigans, which is the city of Toronto. So Nathan Phillips Square contains City Hall, which is contained in those two curved buildings, and it has this illuminated Toronto sign out front. And I decided I wanted to take an image of that scene kind of at night, just after sunset, getting these wispy clouds in the sky, like those streaky clouds, and the sign illuminated, one of those long exposure shots. It's all dramatic and cool. I arrived an hour ahead of time, and there were all these tourists everywhere, as you'd expect. But there's ways in Photoshop to take and the tourist out by taking a bunch of photos and then taking them out either manually or using a mean averaging thing to kind of get rid of all the people. But that requires everybody to move around. Some of the tourists were just standing in one spot in front of the sign. So even after an hour, I never actually got a clear shot of all the pieces of the sign. And that kind of frustrated me. One thing I noticed about tourists is that they tend to go to a place that's really interesting and iconic, and they go right up to it. The one place where you can't actually see the thing that is interesting and iconic, and they stand there, and I don't know why. Why do you do that? Why do you do that, tourist? Why? So the next day I was actually going to head back to Nathan Phillips Square during the day, so I got out of the hotel, took the subway over, and arrived, and that's when I kind of had a bit of an epiphany. And that epiphany was, if I can't beat the tourists, then why not make the art about the tourists? So that's when I grabbed Wally and a clear piece of concrete and made a photo image of Wally doing one of those touristy things at the sign. And that image actually turned out really, really well. So my friends eventually arrived, and we started walking around Toronto, and we ended up walking down Yonge Street. And we noticed that there was these bubbles in the air, and we looked around and we saw, hey, those bubbles are coming out of that window there. So as photographers do, we started taking photos. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with these photos. So I grabbed Wally and just stuck him on a ledge, and then just started taking a whole bunch of shots, one after another, trying to capture these bubbles coming in. The last exploits I'm going to cover in this video is going to Center Island and taking a sunset shot of the iconic Toronto skyline. So we headed over there and we set up and we just hung out for a few hours, shot the breeze, and took photos. I set up one GoPro to shoot a time lapse, and I also set up Wally on a picnic table to also get a sunset shot of him overlooking the skyline. So like I said, that's the last photo for this video. One thing I noticed about myself when I was processing the photos is kind of how I look at the world. And I don't tend to look at the world when I'm looking at it from a photographer's perspective. I don't tend to notice the world as it is, but how I think maybe it should be. I don't walk around going, hey, that's a cool scene. What I tend to think is, that would be a cool scene if it had a Wally in it. Or that scene would be great if it had some elfy woo-woo magic. And I don't really know what to make of that, other than I think it's a kind of interesting insight that I had about how my artistic vision kind of sees the world. Not as it is, but how I think it could be. So that's it for me for my Canadian photography exploits from here in North Carolina. Thanks for following along. If you want to see what I get up to next, please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.